Good evening, my name is George Robson from the School Liaison Department here at Barton Peveril, and I'm joined by Jonathan Prest and Nicola Carcone. If you'd both like to introduce yourselves, and we'll get kick-started.
Well, hello. It's very good to meet parents this evening. I'm sorry that we can't meet you live, but I hope that we can answer some of your questions live at any rate. I've been the principal at Barton Peveril now since 2008, and I have thoroughly enjoyed working here, and I hope that we will be able to meet up at some point over the coming months.
And my name is Nicola Carcone, and I'm the Vice Principal who looks after students and progress. So I'm particularly interested in making sure that students are confident learners and that they achieve at the end of 2 years.
So over the next half an hour, we'll be answering your questions. So do use the chat tab to ask any questions that you've got. So we'll get kick-started with a question that we've received earlier. So what support is available for students at Barton Peveril?
Okay, support starts with tutoring, and I think this is a really important aspect of what we do because it means that students get to see their tutor 4 times a week because they have one tutoring session, but they are probably taught by their tutor. And that continuity of care, I think for me, is really important in terms of knowing that individual and really helping them with many aspects of support that we have at the college, be that support financially, be that support with their well-being, be it support with their learning. So that tutor becomes a central hub and then signpost to the other support that we have here at the college.
Brilliant. Okay, so next question. So Mel asks, are A-levels more acceptable to universities than BTEC options?
Shall I start that one off, George?
Yes, please, yeah.
I think with qualifications, it is all about that expression, horses for courses. It's about getting the right qualification, which a student is both interested in and has the right sort of skills to succeed in. So it isn't as simple as saying which are the right qualification. It would be true also to say that some courses at university would require you to have A-levels. They would be at the more traditional universities and the more traditional, you might call them, academic subjects. But many, indeed most universities now, are very happy with students presenting with a combination of, let's say, a vocational course and a couple of A-levels, or a vocational course with 1 A-level, depending on the size of it. And equally, there are some where perhaps a vocational course is preferred or more helpful when you move on to that course. So if you wanted to study business studies at many universities, a business vocational course would be an ideal qualification. Or indeed, if you wanted to move into nursing, or into early years care, to do a health and social care qualification might be exactly the right route, and you could combine that with an A-level as well. So I don't think it's as simple as saying one is better than the other. I think if you do A-levels, you are choosing to do a more traditional, a more exam-based, a more, I suppose, theoretical qualification. Whereas if you do a vocational course, you may be somebody who would also like to work in a team for some of your assignments. You might be somebody who's interested in how you apply your skills. So I think I'd ask the question in a different way. I'd say, what sort of qualification is going to suit me best? And probably I'd then want to go and do a degree in that kind of qualification.
And I would add, I think research is really important. I've got a couple of examples. First of all, there's a website called Informed Choices. Now that's set up by Russell Group universities who enable students to say, this is the course I want to do at university, how do I get there? So Informed Choices is a really good website. The second thing is you will absolutely, once you start doing the research, be surprised. So for instance, Southampton University for Business and Management will absolutely take the vocational BTEC business. So doing the research now can save time in the long run, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's really helpful advice for students. Elaine asks, how many hours of lessons do students have per subject? I assume per week as well.
Yes, well, a student will have 4.5 hours for an A-level subject. A vocational course might be worth 1 or 2 A-levels. If it's worth 2 A-levels, it would be 9 hours per week. If it's worth 1 A-level, then it would be 4.5 as well. Those are the standard length of teaching, 4.5 hours in a week, and we're going to be teaching that as 3 1.5-hour sessions each week next year. Of course, the academic courses or the examined courses are not the only thing that students will do, so they would also have an hour and a half of tutor time and all those enrichment, or we call them Q extra opportunities, that a student might want to build around their programme, and that might include things like work experience. So that can be many hours in addition to their academic lessons.
Perfect, thank you. Charlie asks, if their son takes further maths as a 4th A-level, is there a limit to his Q extra options?
Well, in theory, no. We try to work with individuals according to their interests and their capabilities. I think you've just got to be careful you don't overload yourself, but we have many students who would do that further maths as a 4th, along with sport or along with music activities or Duke of Edinburgh or things like that. And of course, much of the Q Extra could be things that people do or reinforce outside of the college as well. I mean, Duke of Edinburgh is a great example where people are going to go on their expeditions and they're going to take up weekends and so on. So there's no limitation on those Q Extras that you do alongside your academic courses, but just make sure you've got enough time to do well on your academic courses.
I think that's true of anyone, regardless of taking a 4th A-level, isn't it? It's managing your time properly, make sure you're not overloading yourself too much. Steve asks, do the students use notebooks or iPads or any other technology pieces for lessons?
Well, because we are using the Google Suite for learning, which is amazing in terms of accessibility, I think. What we have for classrooms is Chromebooks. Now, that's not to say that every lesson is on a Chromebook, but the Chromebook enables this access to materials, etc., etc. But as far as note-taking, it's fascinating because it's dependent on subjects. So psychology, for instance, because it's driven by all the theories that they have to learn, they do it in sections, so they have booklets that they provide for the students to make notes in, so it keeps the topics together, which I think is a fascinating way of helping students to organise, and it's certainly something they take on to university because they recognise that theming aspects of their course is really useful. So I would always carry a pen and paper, but Chromebooks, because of that, we do a lot on Google Docs and things like that.
And of course, increasingly students bring their own device. So, I mean, everywhere you look around college, you'll see people have brought their own laptop in if they have one, or indeed might borrow one from college.
Yes, it is very individualised, isn't it, based on the student, their programme of study and how they learn best.
I actually think the habits that they pick up here will take them on to university, because this is where you learn how to learn, I think.
Definitely, yeah. Debbie asks, how does the bus service operate and how do you sign up for it?
So everything that you need to know about transport is on the website. It's really important that you use that website because it has links to the bus companies, and the bus companies operate outside, really. They are individual companies, it's not run by us, so it's really important that all prospective students look on the website for more information. That gives information about bus routes, about bus stops, about times, etc.
It is true to say that we subsidise some of the routes on the buses, so we have an involvement with the buses. And also it would be true to say that the bus companies do take account of people's postcodes in order to plan their routes, to make sure that their routes are going along roads which are going to be picking up students from very close by where they live. So there's a relationship between us and the bus companies, and there's a financial relationship as well. But essentially the ordering and the distributing of bus cards and so on is done through those bus companies, and you can access that online, as Nicola says.
Yeah, I think we'll find increasingly students are travelling from further afield as well, so it's very accessible for any student in the area, really, isn't it? Jemima has a question and asks, what is the learning support service available, What do they offer and how are they accessed?
Okay, so learning support comes in many forms dependent on the need of the individual student. So if a student has an educational healthcare plan, then that very much is supported by the team and that becomes almost bespoke to that individual. Then we have learning support sessions. So this is picked up after enrolment. So when students start at the college, they will do a diagnostic test through the tutor programme, and at that point Julie Stickland, who organises all of the learning support, will reach out to students and then start organising the support that those students need. We find that a lot of support in terms of learning support is actually adapting study skills, but one of the best things I think that the team have been working on here, and we've actually got an award winner for this, is the adaptive technology. So there's a lot of training that goes on in terms of, for example, we have something called Read Write Gold, which is an online reader, which is fantastic for students. So it's kind of like in stages, but the first important thing is the diagnostic testing in the first term.
Would it be fair to say that, like with everything else, we're really trying to look ahead and think about how we set people up for living fully independently and being able to access work in the same way as any other individual in the future? So part of the process is actually working with individuals to reduce their need for support, because they've discovered these means of supporting themselves and understand how they can help themselves, so that as they move into the workplace, they're ready for it.
I think that can be said of any student at Barton Peveril. It's making independent learners that can support themselves for whatever the next step is.
Exactly, yeah.
Rubens asks, when it comes down to changing A-levels, so not for the taste today, but actually when students enrol, can this be done? Should and how could it be done?
Okay, we have a very short window of change, but we do provide that because we recognise that some subjects have never been learnt before. So sociology, psychology, these subjects might not have been done lower down the school. So the window of change is about 4 weeks. And the reason it has to be short, and we wish it could be longer, but sixth form goes incredibly quickly. It is a very short time they are with us, and we start teaching and getting them ready for success from the outset. So we keep it to a 4-week period, but it's important that students contact tutors and then what we call the student progress advisors, who are the head of years really, who can help with that process.
George, I wasn't sure whether Ruben's question was about a wish to change from their application form, and in which case, of course, the enrolment interview we start interviewing from the 12th of August onwards, and at that enrolment interview, students can make their supposedly final decisions about the choices they're wanting to make on their courses. So it's perfectly possible to change from your application to new courses at enrolment. That's a very easy process to do, and you discuss that with your interviewer. It's a little bit harder once that's done, and that's the period that Nicola has been talking about, that 4-week period.
I think it goes back to before researching your options ahead of time, using the informed choices as an example, so you know that you're making the best decision for you as far in advance as possible, really. Alison asks, if they're lucky enough to have booked a holiday on the enrolment days, how can their daughter enrol?
Okay, so by the power of technology, we're doing really a hybrid enrolment. So after you've experienced some of the classes through Taster Days, then we will send you an invite for enrolment, and it'll have a very specific appointment time, but at that point you can choose whether it's online or on site. So in that case, if the holiday is going ahead, then maybe we'll be talking to someone in Spain as they enrol.
Yeah, it's great. It's one of the benefits of the pandemic forcing our arm to do it, but it's actually quite a useful way to make sure anyone can enrol from anywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course it does allow other people to join in that interview very easily as well.
Exactly, and for students that do come on site, gives them a chance to actually experience campus as well, which is positive. So Charlie asks, how will you help students to catch up after a disrupted Year 11, obviously with everything that's gone on?
Well, I'll start off with that one, George, and I think I'd reassure Charlie that we have students who come from a very wide variety of schools every year, so we are used to people not coming with exactly the same preparation for their courses. now, I think what's happened this year is that it's more acute than it's ever been before, the differences in learning that people may present with. And it may be because they've had to isolate more than others, or it may be to do with protecting family members. So we do understand that people may come with varying degrees of completeness of the syllabuses which they've taken. But it will be the expectation of the classroom teachers over those opening months that they diagnose what the needs are of the students in their group, and they may be quite individualised, those needs, and that they put into place the kind of support that's needed to help students to get to that point where they're really accessing the A-levels. I think we've also employed some what we're calling course tutors or subject tutors in each department, whose role it is to help students who may be perhaps particularly behind in their learning. And those are almost peers. They're people who've been through the A-levels here at college, or perhaps just completed a degree at university. They were former Barton Peveril students, and they come back and they work with the students in a slightly more informal way. And I think we did that for the first time last year when people had missed out on parts of their education, and we're doing the same again this year. So there's a real understanding of the issue and the need, and of course it's in our interest to make sure that we help people to catch up as successfully as we possibly can.
Definitely, yeah. Thank you very much. Marianne asks, will there be any opportunity to visit the site prior to results day?
Well, I'm with Marianne. I would desperately like you to visit, and I am hoping that we can still find some options and some ways of giving you that opportunity to come around. To be honest, it's you need to come and see the place, and really, of course, you need to see the place when it's buzzing with activity, because that's when it's very real. It is such a lively, energetic and positive kind of environment. But I think even if you can't come when there are lots of other students in the college, I think you'll get to meet some of the people, and you'll see what the attitudes are. And it is a sort of can-do and a supportive and a caring, but an ambitious kind of environment, and I think you'll find that in the people that you meet. So yes, I very much want that to happen. We've been foiled by our taster events. I feel very disappointed on your behalf for that, and we were looking forward to seeing you in person. But I still think there may be opportunities for people to get round before they actually start their courses.
I think you're exactly right. We'll try and do what we can. Sophie asks, on average, how large are the class sizes?
I think I know the exact answer is 22.8.
Okay.
Now, you don't see many 0.8s in classes, so it'll vary from, I suppose most classes are between 20 and 24 or 25 students in them. There are one or two subjects which might be slightly smaller than that. German might be a little bit smaller, and one or two of the language options, for instance. But by and large, about 20 to 24, 25.
So typically smaller than an average secondary school class?
Typically smaller than a GCSE class in secondary schools. They're busy places, but you kind of want the stimulus of other people in the group as well. I know from a teaching point of view, I like having a good full class because you get that range of opinion, and you also meet more people and find people that you become your friends later in your time at college.
I think it's important as well because the way in which you learn A-level might be slightly different to GCSE in the fact that the teacher becomes the facilitator, sometimes the expert in the room, but really discussion points between students can be where you really start to grapple and learn things. So it's good to have group work.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Kirsty asks, can you please advise how you will cater for the pupils' anxiety of not seeing the college in person before starting, now that taster days are moving online?
Well, I suppose we answered that slightly before by saying, look, we're doing our best to try and look for opportunities for coming in. Enrollment is another opportunity should you elect to come in then. But also what we're trying to do is, I think it's tipping into the notion of well-being. And so in that first week, when you are here for that first week, it is just first years. So you will have the campus to yourself when you start, and that will help you navigate your way around. We'll have students to help with that as well, and staff will be ready for you. They'll be helping you around the campus. So in addition to everyone else who helps out here, it's a lovely start to term. I really appreciate Barton Peveril because all staff come out to help students settle in and find their way around.
And you know, we have college counsellors, the college nurse, we have Barney, the college dog, and he's quite a nice chap to go and talk to. And there are also opportunities for individual students who've done some training at college as mentors and supporters, people who've done counselling courses and so on. And those students often come in on those in the first week to support the new first year students when they're starting and befriend them and take them off to get a coffee and to have a chat. And teachers are very keen that students get to learn names and meet each other in their classes in those first couple of weeks of term. And I think that's important because from that you often form friendships which lead you to meet their group of friends who are in the college, and you widen your circle. So I think it's the business of focusing exclusively upon our first year students in that first week and getting all the people and other students who can help together to help with that. It is going to be a shift coming back into the college environment, but I think there's a lot of support and a lot of help, and students are terribly supportive of each other and very friendly. It is a friendly place. One of the reasons why people seem so happy at Barton Peveril is undoubtedly because of the students themselves.
Yeah, it's a real sense of community here, isn't it?
It's a real sense of
Doing
community.
Q Extra helps with that as well. You're meeting brand new groups of people outside of your curriculum study. So
Yeah, there's so many opportunities out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Chris asks, without knowing his daughter's timetable, how soon before term starts should they buy bus, train, season tickets, passes?
because of where enrolment sits, and once you've enrolled at the college and you're committed to it, you can start that process then, really. And because of where enrolment is this year, it does give you about a 3-week opportunity to get, or 4 weeks to get organised before the start of term. So it's quite a nice introduction to that.
And there's no real panic for it either. The buses companies and the train companies can accommodate a large number of students anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Debbie asks, are there facilities on site that students can use between lessons? So their son is doing a level 3 diploma in sport, and we'd like to know what facilities he can use to help with this course when he gets to us.
Okay, so I mean we deliberately set this event up in the library, and so here is one of those locations. About 270 students would work independently in the library and come in here and use the facilities. But our philosophy in terms of designing the college has been to have study areas in each department zone. So it's possible, for instance, in maths there are about 65 places where you can work when you're not even in lessons, but with the maths department around, with those student tutors that I talked about, with other students around. In this case, we're talking about a student particularly interested in sports, and I would have said that things like the enrichment opportunities are exactly where to look, those Q Extra courses. You can join the college gym, and you can use that and in your free lessons. So you can look on your timetable, look at availability, book yourself into the college gym, as well as the different team sports and so on. So lots of opportunities there, and I mean, there is also, I think we've become aware of this more than ever before, that the social side to college is an important part of the growing up. And there are 3 cafes in college, and the social centre, which has a sort of grab and go food, and a restaurant as well. So these are places which are really quite important, as are the outdoor spaces. Lots of lovely gardens and places with tables where students can meet and talk and do that socialising. And I do genuinely believe that we need to pay enough. We must pay enough attention to the social needs of young people, particularly post-COVID. So I point to those as examples of what to do in your time when you're not in lessons.
Yeah, the place is for theirs to make the most of, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Claire asks, do your catering facilities cater for those with allergies, people that are people EpiPen trained? I think applicable for you?
Absolutely, we have annual training, in mandatory annual training for the use of EpiPens, and what there is actually a policy within the college in terms of allergies and allergy notifications are displayed in every eatery at the college. So we are absolutely aware of this, and we support students where we can.
Comes back to the diversity of our student body, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've got students with all different types of needs, and we cater for all of them.
Yeah.
Amy asks, how drastic is the jump from GCSE courses to A-level courses? Not sure who wants to answer that one.
It is a jump. There is no denying it, because you're pulling on different learning skills, and a lot of the language that you'll see in the assessments is about analysis. It's about using your knowledge and shaping it to answer very specific questions. But the joy of Barton Peveril, and certainly my perspective on it, is that you've got so many teachers who are examiners, they understand the assessment objectives, and they will help and guide students through specifics in terms of building that exam confidence. So I can't deny it is a jump, but as Jonathan said earlier, in those first few weeks, curriculum staff, teachers, talk students through it and develop it in stepping stones, because even our first years will see a step up in the second year as well, but it's all crafted and guided to make sure that students are comfortable with those changes.
There's no expectation that they're on their own doing it themselves.
No.
Perfect, thank you very much. Nikki's question is there any wiggle room for children who may not achieve the required grades for their chosen course due to lockdown affecting their learning? I guess that's at enrolment.
Yeah, so what we do is stick to our entry requirements as advertised in the prospectus, because that feels the fairest thing to do. Where there is wiggle room is choosing the right course for that individual. So if an individual has missed learning because of lockdown, and yet we know from their profile that they are maybe better at long-term learning and doing coursework type assessment, then we'll look at the type of course that they should be doing. I think with enrolment, what's brilliant is the SPAs are involved and the senior leadership are involved, so that we are always around to help give advice.
Yes, and I think it also is important to note that schools have known students for 5 years, and they know the ability of those students, and the guidance to schools and colleges in assessing people for their grades this year has been about having evidence of what a student can achieve. Students do not have to have achieved and have covered all aspects of a course. So if some learning has been lost as a result of COVID, a school will have looked at what the student has done and based their assessment very significantly on what they have shown with what they have done. So we are not expecting many, if any, learners to come to us who have not got the grades that they ought to have got based on their abilities. I think we really are expecting students to get the grades that they have got some work to show they can achieve.
I think the whole student body coming to Barton Peveril this year are in the same boat anyway, aren't they? So you'd hope that it would be reflected quite fairly.
Yes.
Peter asks, do you call teachers by their first name or do you use last/surname like you would in school?
First name, it's college.
Yeah, nice step up from
Yeah.
school. Perfect. Thank you very much. So next question from Lucy. So how will the online taster sessions work for individual courses?
So the understanding is that students, you've signed up for specific courses that you want to taste, and you will join a Google Classroom at a specific time. So the lesson will be live. You are already on the Google Classrooms collecting information, and you can see the type of materials, but they will be live lessons during the taster days.
And you will have a timetable
Yeah.
which will be sent to you. Well, in fact, you will see it online, and you will go through those for different subjects or classes for a course, for instance, and you will work your way through those over the course of the day.
I think experience of the lessons is still going to be the same. You'll still be experiencing the subjects, so you can make an informed decision when it comes to enrolment.
Yeah, Yeah, it's really looking at the subject content, isn't it?
Yes.
And I think it's part of the reassurance for some of those other questions we've had earlier about moving from school to college, that jump, how big is it? Is it too difficult? I think these taster days help people to see that we do understand where students are at the moment, and the taster days are an example of how we might be able to just start taking people a little bit further than where they are, but not a daunting experience. It should be fun.
Yeah.
They should feel they learn something in the course of those sessions, and that they are, they're ready for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Molly asks, would you recommend doing 4 A-levels or aiming for 3 with Q extra options?
Again, it depends on the individual. I'll start this whole thing by saying universities ask for 3 A-levels. And in so many ways, you want those 3 A-levels to be the best that you can get. And if doing 4 will dilute your time, then do 3. It might also be useful. So, for instance, we had questions before about maths and further maths. Because there's a crossover, doing maths, further maths and 2 other A-levels might be a suitable programme, because you are reinforcing learning in that maths and further maths. So it really depends on the learner, really does. We think very carefully when students come on enrolment and say, I want to do 4, we really look at them as individuals to make sure they're making the right choices. I know it's really difficult to narrow it down to 3 sometimes, especially if you've got a subject that you're really passionate about and want to keep it on. But I think, again, it's about that long-term planning. What's your next step? And therefore, choosing your A-levels might be dependent on that final step. Now, in saying that, people might not know what that next step is, but that's what enrolment's for, so that the enroller will help guide you to make a choice that will keep all of your options open.
Yes, and I think the simplest answer would be, on the whole, go for 3 with Q Extra, because the Q Extra helps you to broaden yourself, and universities and employers don't just want people who are good at A-levels, they want people who are interesting, they want people who have interests and follow them up, and they want people who have other skills, those softer skills that you acquire through the kinds of situations you'd find with Q Extra. So whatever you're doing, I'd recommend you involve Q Extra as part of your programme. But in many ways, I would go and focus on really good results in 3 subjects at A-level, if you're doing A-levels, and Q Extra alongside. And it is really only for a few, and usually the double mathematicians, that there would be 4 A-levels.
Perfect. It's setting yourself up to succeed, isn't it? And developing the whole student so that you're good for the next step. Andrea asks, do you have student mentorships? So I think this is something you touched on earlier with, obviously, our student mentors coaching students.
Well, it comes in a variety of ways. So Jonathan's already mentioned the course tutors, who are ex-Barton Peveril students. So having experienced A-levels, even experienced degree level as well, they are really well placed to help students build those study skills. But then, of course, we've got the wellbeing mentors. So we have got students who support. And then beyond that, we have student ambassadors as well. George, you work with the ambassadors and can probably talk more about the role that they play in the college. So there's many ways in which students help other students, I would say.
I think it comes back to the sense of community, and students are always here to help other students, particularly, like you said before, in the first 4 or 5 weeks, where students are needed to help support other students because they've been in the same situation. So we've got another question through YouTube. They ask, how do you support and actively encourage the free speech of students?
Well, what a great question. I'm not sure I've had that question before. Well, I think that we certainly talk about fundamental British values, and that discussion takes place in all tutor groups within college and in the first year. And one of the elements of that is about freedoms and freedom of speech, and I think that is perhaps a rather good example of how we help people to understand what it is which is so rich about the society in which we live. I mean, just as in the society at large, people have to always think about what the effect of what they say is upon others. So we wouldn't want students to cause offence to other students, but we do believe that students should be able to discuss and debate and present opinions, and hopefully that helps people to become better informed and to be able to research, I suppose, what lies behind their views and other people's views. I mean, essentially, A-levels are very interested in the academic range of opinion. And so freedom of speech and opinion will come into many of the different subject areas. You can't really do politics or sociology or psychology or even things like geography without having opinions on things. And I think the freedom to express that, but also the academic discipline of backing it up, is what we hope people will learn.
Perfect, thank you very much. I think we've got time for one more question. So Christine asks, how many lessons do students have per week?
So I think we answered that previously in terms of how many hours per subject per week. So if you're doing 3 subjects and you've got the 4.5 hours, I think it's important to note though, and something we haven't mentioned here, is we expect students to replicate the same amount of hours in terms of independent learning. So work will be set to really encourage that independent learning, because that's where the curiosity lies.
So, for instance, in a full-time week, there's about 30 hours of potential teaching, 4.5 hours per subject. So it would be possible to get significant amounts of independent learning done whilst students are in college, if they're in college for the day, using these study facilities that we see, for instance, behind us here. But since lessons are 1.5 hours, you do 3 lessons per subject, which is 4.5 hours of learning per subject per week. And most people do 3 subjects if they're the equivalent of A-levels, and some enrichment Q extra as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And this is quite a nice question to finish up the Q&A on. So how often do you report on students' progress to parents?
Okay, so I'll try and I did say something about this in the presentation, but over the course of 2 years there are 5 caps. So sorry to use the acronyms again, but this is college assessment points, and therefore we're reporting at those times. However, and that they behave a bit like mocks really, so they are formal assessments, and we report throughout the 2 years. But on top of that, we have parents' evenings, and on top of that, we also have course assessments as well. Now, what this means is we are constantly monitoring, and it may be small tasks, it may be larger tasks, but we are constantly monitoring those study skills to enable students to reflect, and we're big believers in that reflective learner, because that's where you really gain depth to your learning, because you're able to say, this is what I need to do next. So
it's not really just reporting
to
parents, it's reporting to the students. It's the students being engaged in this process, and they really should be engaged in it. So it is this 3-way idea, which again I mentioned in my part of the presentation. You know, it's the relationship between parent, student, and the college. And within that, there's some very good data and information which parents can get access to, and these regular moments of checking the learning, these 5 caps that Nicola's talking about, common assessment points, and also the parents' evenings. The parents' evenings are online, and we found that that's been incredibly popular. It's one of the few things probably about COVID which I think has been a real step forward. Parent evenings online, where you have booked calls, allows parents wherever they are, even if parents are at work still, to take part in conversations about the progress of their son or daughter. And there are no delays, so you're not there waiting or desperately trying to find a teacher in a classroom in a darkened corner of the college. You know, it's not like that, and I think it's very much better for it. Parents certainly say they appreciate them.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I think that brings this even to a close. There is still an opportunity for you to ask your questions. There's a form on the site that was sent to you, and we'll get those answered as soon as we can. Thank you both for your answers, and thank you for attending, and we look forward to welcoming you next. Thank you very much.